In a distant corner of the galaxy, far from the bustling cities and advanced technology of modern civilization, John Carter lived a quiet life. His days were spent fishing by a small lake near his cabin, the water shimmering under the twin suns of the planet he called home. It was a peaceful existence, but one that often left him lost in thought. Memories of battles fought long ago would creep into his mind like shadows at dusk, reminding him of a time when life was anything but calm. John wasn't alone in his solitude. A few miles away, Maria Lopes occupied her days tending to her garden and tinkering with old machinery she had collected over the years. Like John, she too carried the weight of past wars, though she rarely spoke about them. To most people, they were just two aging individuals who had faded into obscurity after serving humanity during its darkest hours. Few remembered their names or deeds, and even fewer cared. After all, this was an era dominated by younger, faster, and more technologically enhanced soldiers. But peace never lasts forever. Rumors began to spread across the galaxy, whispers of attacks on Earth's outer colonies. An unknown alien force had emerged, ruthless and efficient, leaving destruction in its wake. The Galactic Council, the governing body overseeing human affairs among the stars, scrambled to respond. Their elite forces, equipped with cutting-edge weapons and powered armor, launched counterattacks only to be met with devastating losses. Panic rippled through the council chambers as leaders debated what to do next. Admiral Chen, a pragmatic man with decades of experience, suggested something unconventional. "We need every resource we can muster," he said during a tense meeting, "even those we've forgotten." His proposal: recruit the retired soldiers, the ones who had fought before technology ruled the battlefield. Many council members laughed outright. Others dismissed the idea as desperate and foolish. How could old men and women possibly stand against an enemy that had already crushed their finest warriors? Meanwhile, John received a message from an old friend. It came through an outdated comm device, crackling with static. The voice on the other end was urgent. "John, it's happening again. We're needed." He listened silently, then turned off the device without responding. War was no longer his burden to bear, or so he told himself. Maria arrived at his door later that evening, her face grim. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "You heard?" she asked, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. John nodded, gesturing toward the table where he kept maps and notes from campaigns past. They both knew why she was there. "They think we're useless now," Maria said, her tone sharp. "Too old, too slow. But they don't understand what we know. What we've seen." John sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It doesn't matter what they think. Those days are behind us." "Are they?" Maria countered. "Look around, John. Young kids are dying out there because they don't have the experience. And we're sitting here doing nothing." Her words struck a nerve. John stared at the wall, thinking of the countless lives lost in wars he had fought. He had tried to leave it all behind, to live a simple life. But deep down, he knew Maria was right. Experience mattered. Strategy mattered. Courage mattered. And if no one else was willing to step up, maybe it really was up to them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then John stood, walking over to a dusty cabinet in the corner of the room. He opened it to reveal a collection of medals, dog tags, and photographs. Reminders of a life once lived. "If we're going to do this," he said finally, turning to Maria, "we'll need help." Maria smiled faintly. "I already have a list." And just like that, the wheels were set in motion. Two old soldiers, long written off as relics of the past, began preparing for war once more. Little did they know, their actions would soon capture the attention of not only the Galactic Council but the entire galaxy. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with tension as leaders from across the galaxy gathered to discuss the growing crisis. Holographic displays floated above the table, showing images of burning colonies and fleets retreating in disarray. Admiral Chen stood at the center, his expression calm but firm. He had spent years commanding troops, and he knew better than anyone that desperation called for unconventional solutions. "We've tried everything," Admiral Chen said, addressing the council. "Our best soldiers, our most advanced technology. It's not enough. The enemy is unlike anything we've faced before. If we don't act now, more colonies will fall." A council member named Senator Grayson leaned forward, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Are you suggesting we rely on retirees? People who haven't seen combat in decades?" Chen didn't flinch. "I'm suggesting we use every resource available to us. These are soldiers who fought without the luxury of powered armor or energy shields. They survived because of skill, strategy, and sheer determination. We can't afford to ignore that kind of experience." Murmurs filled the room, some agreeing, others scoffing outright. One councilwoman shook her head dismissively. "They're old, Admiral. Times have changed. War isn't fought the same way anymore." Before Chen could respond, another council member chimed in. "And what if they fail? What message does it send if we throw away our last hope on a group of has-beens?" The debate raged on, but in the end, the decision was made, not out of confidence, but out of desperation. A formal request would be sent to retired soldiers, inviting them to join the fight. Few expected any of them to accept. Back on Earth, John Carter sat in his cabin, staring at the comm device Maria had left behind. Her words echoed in his mind. Asterisk, young kids are dying out there, asterisk. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than him, bigger than any one person. Still, doubt lingered. Was he really ready to return to the chaos of war? Maria, however, wasted no time. She reached out to a handful of trusted comrades, people she knew wouldn't hesitate when duty called. First on her list was Daniel Hayes, a brilliant strategist whose tactical mind had turned the tide in countless battles. Though Daniel now lived a quiet life teaching history at a university, he answered Maria's call almost immediately. Next was Rachel Stone, a sniper whose reputation for precision was legendary. Rachel had disappeared from public life after the war, choosing solitude over fame. When Maria contacted her, Rachel listened silently before responding with a single word: "Where?" Finally, there was Robert King, an engineer known for his ability to build weapons out of scraps. Robert ran a small repair shop on the outskirts of town, fixing machinery for farmers and traders. He greeted Maria's message with a laugh. "Figured you'd come knocking sooner or later," he said. "When do we start?" As each veteran agreed to join, Maria felt a flicker of hope. This wasn't just about fighting. It was about proving that experience still mattered, that courage wasn't measured by age or strength alone. John remained undecided until Maria returned to his cabin 2 days later. This time, she brought Daniel with her. The three of them sat around the table, discussing the situation late into the night. Daniel laid out maps and schematics, explaining what little they knew about the enemy. Robert joined via hologram, offering insights into potential weaknesses in alien technology. Rachel appeared briefly, her sharp eyes scanning the plans before nodding in approval. By the end of the meeting, John's doubts began to fade. Looking at the faces of his old friends, he realized something important. They weren't just soldiers. They were a family, bound together by shared struggles and sacrifices. And if anyone could face this new threat, it was them. The next morning, John packed his belongings and headed to the rendezvous point Maria had arranged. As he walked out the door, he glanced back at his peaceful cabin one last time. Peace, he thought, was a luxury humanity might not survive without. It was time to remind the galaxy why the old soldiers had once been feared and respected. The old soldiers gathered in a dusty warehouse on the outskirts of a small town. It was a place Maria had chosen carefully, far from prying eyes, and close enough to access supplies. The air smelled of oil and rust, and sunlight filtered through cracks in the walls, casting long shadows across the floor. Boxes of outdated gear were stacked against one wall, relics from wars fought decades ago. For John, Daniel, Rachel and Robert. It felt strangely familiar. Maria stood at the center of the room, her hands resting on a makeshift table covered with maps and notes. She looked at each of them in turn, her expression serious but determined. "We're not kids anymore," she said bluntly, "but we're all that's left. If we don't step up, no one will." John nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the map. He traced a line with his finger, pointing to one of the outer colonies under attack. "This is where they hit hardest. No one knows why, but if we can hold this position, we might buy some time for reinforcements." Daniel leaned forward, studying the map closely. His mind worked quickly, piecing together strategies even as he spoke. "It's risky," he said. "They'll expect us to defend the colony directly. But if we set up ambush points here," he pointed to a narrow pass between two mountains, "we could catch them off guard." Rachel crossed her arms, her sharp eyes scanning the plans. "Ambushes are fine, but we need precision. If these aliens are as fast as reports say, we'll only get one shot. That means I'll need a clear view and steady ground." Robert chuckled, picking up a battered rifle from one of the boxes. "Leave the shooting to you, Eddie. I'll focus on keeping our gear running." He held up the rifle, inspecting it critically. "This thing's ancient, but it'll do the job once I tweak it." The group began dividing tasks, their movements efficient and practiced. Despite years apart, they fell into sync like pieces of a well-oiled machine. John took charge of logistics, organizing food, ammunition, and transport. Maria coordinated communications, ensuring they could stay in touch with any surviving colonial forces. Daniel finalized the battle plan, while Rachel scouted vantage points around the warehouse to test her aim. Robert disappeared into a corner, muttering to himself as he dismantled weapons and patched together new ones. As they worked, memories of past battles surfaced unbidden. They talked little about those days, but the bond they shared spoke volumes. Each scar, each story, reminded them of what they had endured and what they were capable of. By nightfall, the warehouse was transformed into a crude command center. Supplies were packed, weapons prepared, and plans memorized. Exhausted but resolute, the team sat together, sharing a simple meal of bread and stew. The mood was somber, yet there was an unspoken understanding among them. This wasn't just about duty, it was about protecting something greater than themselves. "We're going to stick out like sore thumbs," Robert joked, breaking the silence. "Young soldiers with shiny armor won't know what to make of us." "They'll figure it out soon enough," Maria replied with a smirk, "especially when we show them how it's done." John smiled faintly, though his thoughts remained heavy. He glanced at his companions, feeling a mix of pride and worry. They were ready as they could be. But the enemy ahead was unknown, unpredictable, and while experience gave them an edge, it didn't guarantee victory. As the fire crackled in the corner of the room, casting flickering light over their faces, Daniel broke the quiet. "Whatever happens out there," he said, his voice steady, "we go down fighting. Together." No one argued. They knew the risks, and they accepted them willingly. Tomorrow, they would leave the safety of the warehouse and step back onto the battlefield. For now, they allowed themselves a moment of peace, a brief reminder of what they were fighting for. The journey to the front lines was anything but smooth. The old soldiers traveled in a battered transport ship, its engines groaning with every kilometer. John sat at the controls, his hands steady despite the occasional shudder that ran through the vessel. Maria monitored communications, her eyes scanning for any sign of enemy activity. Behind them, Daniel pored over maps, adjusting their route to avoid known conflict zones. Rachel sharpened her knives and checked her rifle, ensuring everything was in perfect condition. Robert tinkered with spare parts, muttering under his breath as he worked. As they approached the outer colonies, the signs of war became impossible to ignore. Smoke rose from distant planets, staining the sky with dark clouds. Wreckage floated in space, remnants of ships torn apart by battle. The sight weighed heavily on all of them, but no one spoke. They had seen destruction before, though not on this scale. Their first encounter with younger soldiers came when they landed on a damaged outpost near the edge of the contested zone. A group of troops stood guard outside, their sleek armor gleaming under the dim light of a nearby star. At first glance, the veterans looked out of place among these modern warriors. Their patched-up uniforms and outdated weapons drew curious stares, followed by whispers of doubt. "What are they doing here?" One soldier muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "This isn't some museum tour." Maria stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "We're here to help," she said simply. "You've been losing ground. Maybe we can change that." The young officer in charge, a man named Lieutenant Hayes, raised an eyebrow. "With respect, ma'am, you don't exactly look ready for this fight." Before Maria could respond, Rachel moved past her, carrying her rifle casually over one shoulder. Without a word, she walked to the edge of the outpost and pointed toward a distant ridge. Moments later, a scout drone appeared, hovering silently above the terrain. Rachel raised her weapon, exhaled slowly, and fired. The shot echoed sharply, and the drone exploded in a burst of sparks. The soldiers stared in stunned silence. Rachel turned back to them, her expression unreadable. "Still think we're too old?" she asked dryly. Lieutenant Hayes hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "All right, you've got our attention. But if you're coming with us, you follow orders." John stepped forward, meeting the lieutenant's gaze. "We'll work together," he said evenly. "But don't mistake age for weakness." Over the next few hours, the veterans proved their worth time and again. When a small squad of alien fighters launched a surprise attack, the young soldiers scrambled to respond. But the veterans moved with practiced efficiency, taking cover and returning fire with precision. Daniel directed the defense, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Flank them. Push left," he shouted, his commands clear and decisive. Robert used makeshift traps to slow down the advancing enemies, rigging explosive charges from scraps he brought along. Maria hacked into the outpost's surveillance system, identifying weak points in the enemy formation. And Rachel? She remained hidden, picking off targets one by one with deadly accuracy. By the time the skirmish ended, the young soldiers looked at the veterans with newfound respect, and perhaps a little awe. That night, as they regrouped inside the outpost, Lieutenant Hayes approached John. "I owe you an apology," he admitted. "I didn't think you could handle this. I was wrong." John shrugged, brushing off the comment. "Save your apologies for after the war," he replied. "For now, just focus on staying alive." Despite the victory, the mood remained somber. The veterans knew this was only the beginning. The real test lay ahead, deeper within enemy territory. As they prepared to move out, Maria glanced at her companions, each lost in their own thoughts. They had proven themselves once, but the road ahead would demand even more. And yet there was something comforting about being together again. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them side by side, as they always had. The veterans pushed deeper into enemy territory, their movements cautious and deliberate. The landscape around them was harsh and unfamiliar. Rocky plains stretched endlessly, dotted with jagged cliffs and strange, twisted trees that looked like they belonged to another world. Above, the sky churned with dark clouds, lightning flickering in the distance. It felt alive, almost hostile, as if the planet itself resented their presence. John led the group, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger. Maria followed close behind, her hand resting on the hilt of a knife strapped to her belt. Daniel carried a map, marking their progress and adjusting their route as needed. Rachel walked slightly ahead, her rifle slung over her shoulder, always alert for movement. Robert brought up the rear, carrying a heavy pack filled with tools and spare parts. Despite their age, they moved with purpose, each step measured and confident. Their destination was a Vraxkai outpost, a fortified structure built into the side of a cliff. Intelligence suggested it served as a key communication hub for the alien forces. If they could disable it, they might disrupt the enemy's ability to coordinate attacks across the region. But getting inside would be no easy task. The outpost was heavily guarded, its defenses designed to repel even the most advanced assault teams. As they approached, John signaled for the group to take cover behind a cluster of rocks. He pulled out a pair of binoculars and studied the area carefully. "Looks like we got patrols circling the perimeter," he said quietly. "And those turrets on the walls mean we can't just walk in." Daniel nodded, unfolding the map. "We'll need to create a distraction," he said, "something big enough to draw their attention away from the main entrance." Robert grinned, pulling a small device from his pack. "Leave that to me," he said. "I've been working on something special." He held up what looked like a bundle of wires and scrap metal, hastily assembled but functional. "Call it a surprise package. Should keep them busy for a while." Rachel scanned the area, searching for a vantage point. She spotted a ridge overlooking the outpost and pointed it out to the group. "If I can get up there, I can cover you while you move in," she said. "But I'll need time to set up." Maria glanced at John, who gave a slight nod. "All right," she said. "Here's the plan. Robert sets off his distraction. Rachel takes position on the ridge. Once the guards are distracted, the rest of us move in through the side entrance." "Clear." Everyone agreed, and they split up to prepare. Rachel climbed the ridge silently, finding a spot where she had a clear view of the outpost. Below, Robert crept closer to the perimeter, setting his makeshift bomb near a cluster of supply crates. He activated the timer and retreated quickly, rejoining the others just as the explosion rocked the area. The blast sent flames and debris flying into the air, drawing the attention of the Vraxkai guards. They scrambled toward the source of the disturbance, leaving the side entrance temporarily unguarded. Seizing the moment, John, Maria, and Daniel sprinted toward the opening, staying low to avoid detection. Rachel covered them from above, taking out 2 guards who tried to intercept them. Inside, the outpost was dimly lit, its corridors lined with strange, pulsating machinery. The air hummed with energy, and the walls seemed to shift slightly, as if alive. Maria shivered but kept moving, her focus sharp. "This place gives me the creeps," she muttered under her breath. Daniel consulted a crude blueprint he had pieced together from intercepted data. "Control room should be straight ahead," he whispered. "But we're not alone." Sure enough, they soon encountered resistance. A group of Vraxkai soldiers emerged from a side corridor, their insectoid bodies clicking ominously as they advanced. John raised his weapon, firing steadily while Maria and Daniel flanked them. The aliens fought fiercely, their movements unnervingly fast, but the veterans held their ground. When the skirmish ended, John turned to the others, breathing heavily. "We can't afford delays," he said. "Keep moving." They pressed on, determined to reach the control room before reinforcements arrived. Each step brought them closer to their goal, and closer to uncovering the truth about the Vraxkai invasion. Whatever awaited them, they knew one thing for certain: failure was not an option. The control room of the Vraxkai outpost was unlike anything the veterans had ever seen. The walls pulsed faintly with an eerie green light, and strange symbols flickered across panels that seemed to float in midair. Alien technology hummed around them, its purpose both fascinating and unsettling. John glanced at Daniel, who was already studying the controls, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We need to shut this down," Daniel said, pointing to a central console. "This is where they're sending their orders. If we disable it, we cut off communication for the entire region." Maria moved to assist him, her fingers brushing against the alien interface cautiously. "How do we even work this thing?" she asked. "It's not exactly user-friendly." Daniel hesitated, then grabbed a small device from his pocket, a universal translator he'd modified years ago. He connected it to the console, and after a few tense moments, the symbols began to shift into something recognizable: crude diagrams and commands written in broken English. "It's working," Daniel muttered, excitement creeping into his voice. I think I can reroute their systems, but it'll take time. Time we might not have, Rachel said sharply. She stood near the entrance, keeping watch through a narrow slit in the wall. Outside, the sounds of movement grew louder. Reinforcements were closing in. John stepped closer to the door, his weapon ready. Keep going, he told Daniel. We'll hold them off. Robert knelt beside Maria, examining the machinery. Let me see if I can rig a failsafe, he said. If things go south, we should have a way to blow this place sky high. As Robert worked, Maria helped Daniel navigate the alien system. It was slow and frustrating, but they made steady progress. Every few seconds, Daniel would pause to wipe sweat from his forehead, his hands trembling slightly. The weight of what they were doing pressed heavily on all of them. One wrong move could mean disaster. Outside, Rachel spotted the first wave of Raxkai soldiers approaching. Their chitinous armor gleamed under the dim light, and their clicking mandibles echoed ominously in the corridor. She raised her rifle, taking careful aim. The first shot rang out, striking one of the aliens directly in its glowing eye. It collapsed instantly, but more followed, their numbers overwhelming. They're coming, Rachel shouted, firing rapidly. Hurry up. John joined her at the doorway, providing cover fire. Bullets ricocheted off the aliens' tough exoskeletons, forcing the team to rely on precision rather than power. Despite their age, the veterans fought with a skill that came from years of experience. Each shot counted, each movement deliberate. Inside, Robert finished wiring the failsafe. Done, he said, standing up quickly. But we need to arm it manually when the time comes. Daniel nodded, his focus still on the console. Almost there, just a little more. Maria glanced nervously toward the door. Daniel, we're running out of time. I know. He snapped, his voice tight with stress. His fingers flew over the controls, entering commands as fast as he could. Finally, the console emitted a low hum, and the lights dimmed slightly. Got it, he exclaimed. Communication lines are down. Before anyone could celebrate, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. A massive Raxkai warrior appeared, towering over the others. Its claws dripped with some kind of acidic substance, and its multifaceted eyes glowed with rage. John stepped forward, raising his weapon. Fall back, he ordered. We'll hold it off while you set the charges. Daniel and Maria hurried to activate the failsafe, while John and Rachel faced the creature head-on. It lunged at them, its movements surprisingly swift for something so large. Rachel fired repeatedly, aiming for its weak points, but the alien shrugged off most of the hits. John tackled it from the side, driving his knife into one of its joints. The creature roared in pain, thrashing wildly. Charges are set, Robert yelled. We need to go, now. Rachel grabbed John's arm, pulling him away as the creature recovered. They sprinted down the corridor, the ground shaking beneath them as the outpost began to collapse. Behind them, the failsafe detonated, engulfing the control room in flames. They barely made it outside before the explosion rocked the entire structure. The veterans stumbled to safety, collapsing onto the rocky ground as debris rained down around them. Smoke billowed into the sky, marking the end of their mission, and the beginning of hope for the war-torn colonies. The veterans lay on the rocky ground, gasping for breath as the outpost crumbled behind them. Smoke filled the air, choking and thick, while chunks of debris rained down around them. John coughed, shielding his face with one arm as he struggled to sit up. His body ached from the fight, but adrenaline kept him moving. He glanced at the others, checking to make sure everyone was still alive. Maria sat nearby, her hands trembling as she brushed dust from her jacket. A small cut above her eyebrow bled lightly, but she ignored it, her eyes fixed on the burning wreckage. Did we do it? She asked hoarsely. Is it over? Robert leaned against a rock, clutching his side where a piece of shrapnel had grazed him. We did our part, he said grimly. But this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Rachel stood a few feet away, her rifle slung over her shoulder. She scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of surviving enemies. The explosion had silenced the immediate threat, but the Vraxkai were not known for giving up easily. "We need to move," she said sharply. "They'll send reinforcements soon." Daniel nodded in agreement, though his face was pale with exhaustion. "She's right. We've disrupted their communications, but they'll adapt. We have to get back to the others and plan our next step." As they gathered their gear and prepared to leave, a sudden crackle of static broke through the silence. Maria pulled out her communicator, frowning as she adjusted the frequency. A voice came through, distorted but clear enough to understand. "This is Lieutenant Hayes. Do you copy? What's your status?" John grabbed the communicator, his voice firm despite his fatigue. "Hayes, this is Carter. Mission accomplished. Outpost destroyed. But we're sitting ducks out here. Send extraction. Now." "Copy that," Hayes replied. "Hold your position. We're en route." The group exchanged weary glances. They had succeeded in their mission, but none of them felt triumphant. The cost of victory weighed heavily on their shoulders. Daniel stared at the ruins of the outpost, his expression somber. "We lost good people today," he said quietly. "Too many." No one argued. Each of them carried the weight of sacrifice, not just from this battle, but from every war they had fought. It was a burden they shared silently, unspoken but understood. Hours passed before the sound of engines broke the quiet. A transport ship descended from the sky, its landing lights cutting through the haze of smoke and ash. Lieutenant Hayes stepped out first, followed by a team of soldiers. His face was grim as he approached the veterans. "You did well," he said simply. "Better than anyone expected." John shook his head. "Don't thank us yet. This war is far from over." As the group boarded the ship, Robert caught sight of a young soldier staring at him curiously. The kid looked barely old enough to hold a weapon, let alone fight in a war. Robert gave him a tired smile. "What?" he asked gruffly. "Never seen an old man blow something up before." The soldier hesitated, then grinned sheepishly. "Guess I underestimated you guys." "You're not the first," Maria muttered, taking a seat near the window. She watched as the outpost disappeared into the distance, replaced by endless stretches of barren land. For now, they were safe, but only for now. Back at the main base, news of their success spread quickly. The Galactic Council, watching via holographic feeds, erupted into stunned applause. Admiral Chen allowed himself a rare smile. "I told you," he said to the skeptical council members. "Never underestimate experience." But even as praise poured in, the veterans remained focused. They knew the Vraxkai would regroup, stronger and more determined than ever. And when that day came, they would be ready. Together, they had proven that courage and skill weren't bound by age or technology. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them, as they always had. Side by side, the veterans returned to the main base as heroes, though they didn't feel much like celebrating. The destruction of the Vraxkai outpost had been a significant victory, but none of them were naive enough to think it would end the war. Instead, they gathered in a small briefing room, their faces lined with exhaustion and determination. John stood at the head of the table, leaning over a map marked with new intel about the enemy's movements. "They're not just attacking colonies," Daniel said, pointing to clusters of red dots on the map. "They're looking for something. Every target has one thing in common: proximity to ancient ruins." Maria frowned, her arms crossed tightly. "Ruins? What kind of ruins?" Daniel hesitated, glancing at the others before responding. "We don't know yet, but whatever it is, it's important to them. Maybe it's a weapon, or maybe it's something worse." Robert leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "Great. So we're fighting bugs who are treasure hunting now." "Perfect." Rachel remained silent, her sharp eyes scanning the map. Finally, she spoke. "If we find out what they're after, we can hit them where it hurts, cut off their goal before they reach it." John nodded slowly. Agreed. But first, we need to figure out where they'll strike next. He tapped a location near the center of the map. This colony, it's close to one of those ruins. If I were them, that's where I'd go. Maria straightened, her expression hardening. Then that's where we go too. We can't let them get there first. The group began planning their next move, dividing tasks among themselves. Rachel volunteered to scout ahead, using her sniper skills to gather intelligence without being detected. Robert focused on upgrading their weapons, adding modifications to make them more effective against the Vraxkai's tough exoskeletons. Daniel worked closely with Lieutenant Hayes, analyzing data from previous battles to predict the aliens' tactics, and Maria coordinated with local colonial forces, ensuring they were prepared for an attack. As they prepared, the Galactic Council convened once again, watching the unfolding events with growing respect for the old soldiers. Admiral Chen addressed the council, his voice filled with quiet pride. These veterans have proven themselves time and again. They've shown us that experience and strategy can still turn the tide, even against overwhelming odds. But not everyone was convinced. Senator Grayson, who had initially dismissed the idea of relying on retired soldiers, voiced his concerns. What happens when they fail? Their victories so far have been impressive, but this enemy is relentless. Are we placing too much hope on a handful of people? Before anyone could respond, a young officer interrupted the meeting. "Sir, urgent report," he said, handing Admiral Chen a datapad. Chen scanned the information quickly, his face darkening. The Vraxkai are mobilizing in greater numbers than ever before. It looks like they're heading straight for the colony we identified. The news sent shockwaves through the council chamber. Admiral Chen turned to the holographic display showing live footage of the veterans preparing for battle. "They're our best chance," he said firmly. "We need to trust them." Back at the base, the veterans received word of the incoming threat. John called the team together, his tone grave. "This isn't going to be easy," he said. "The Vraxkai are coming in force, but if we can hold them off long enough, reinforcements will arrive." Rachel adjusted the scope on her rifle, her movements precise and deliberate. "Let them come," she said coldly. "We faced worse." Maria placed a hand on John's shoulder, her voice steady. "Whatever happens, we do it together, just like always." As they loaded into vehicles and set out toward the colony, the weight of their mission settled heavily on their shoulders. They knew the stakes, and they knew the risks. But they also knew one thing for certain. Giving up was never an option. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it head-on. Together, the colony was eerily quiet as the veterans arrived, its streets empty and buildings dark. The residents had been evacuated hours earlier, leaving behind only silence and the looming threat of the Vraxkai. John led the group to a defensive position near the edge of town, where they could see the horizon clearly. The sky was overcast, clouds heavy with rain that never fell, casting everything in a dim gray light. "They'll come from the north," Daniel said, pointing to a ridge in the distance. "That's the easiest route for their numbers." Rachel climbed onto a rooftop, setting up her sniper perch. She checked her rifle one last time, ensuring every detail was perfect. "I'll keep watch," she said. "You'll know when they're close." Maria stayed on the ground, helping Robert set traps along the main road into the colony. Using scrap metal and wires, they rigged explosives to slow down the advancing enemy. "These won't stop them," Robert muttered, tightening a bolt, "but they'll buy us time." John paced back and forth, his eyes scanning the horizon. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. If they failed here, the colony, and possibly more, would fall. But he pushed the thought aside. Doubt wouldn't help them now. Hours passed in tense silence. Then Rachel's voice crackled through their comms. "Movement at the ridge. They're coming." Everyone sprang into action. John and Maria took cover behind barricades, their weapons ready. Daniel crouched nearby, clutching a tablet linked to the colony's security systems. "Traps are armed," he said. Just wait for my signal. The first wave of Vraxkai appeared, their insectoid forms scuttling across the ridge like shadows brought to life. Their clicking grew louder as they descended toward the colony, relentless and unyielding. Rachel fired the first shot, taking out a scout before it could alert the others. The sound echoed across the barren landscape, signaling the start of battle. Now, Daniel shouted. Robert triggered the explosives remotely, and the road erupted in flames. Dozens of Vraxkai were caught in the blast, their chidnous bodies crumbling under the force. But the rest pressed forward, undeterred by the loss. They're not stopping, Maria yelled, firing steadily as the alien surged closer. John aimed carefully, targeting the larger warriors leading the charge. His shots found their marks, but the Vraxkai kept coming, their glowing eyes fixed on the defenders. Hold the line, he ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. Rachel worked tirelessly from her perch, picking off enemies with precision. Each shot counted, each kill vital. Sweat dripped down her face, but she didn't falter. Below, Maria reloaded her weapon, shouting encouragement to the others. Keep pushing. We can do this. As the fight raged on, reinforcements finally arrived. Troops sent by the Galactic Council, armed with advanced weaponry. Lieutenant Hayes led the charge, his voice booming over the comm. Fall back to secondary positions. Let us handle the front. But John shook his head, even though no one could see him. Not yet, he muttered. We've got more to give. The turning point came when Rachel spotted a massive alien towering above the others, a commander likely directing the attack. Big guy at 12 o'clock. She called out. Take him down, and we break their chain of command. John nodded, adjusting his aim. He steadied his breathing, exhaled slowly, and pulled the trigger. The round hit true, striking the creature's exposed throat. It let out a deafening screech before collapsing, sending shockwaves through the Vraxkai ranks. Without their leader, the remaining forces hesitated, giving the defenders the opening they needed. Now, John shouted, push them back. Together, the veterans and reinforcements drove the Vraxkai away, forcing them to retreat into the wilderness. When the dust settled, the colony was safe. For now. Exhausted but alive, the team regrouped, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. We did it, Maria said softly, leaning against a wall. For now. John looked at his companions, pride swelling in his chest. They had faced impossible odds and prevailed, but he knew the war was far from over. Still, for the first time in days, he allowed himself a small smile. They had proven once again that courage wasn't about age or strength. It was about standing your ground when it mattered most. The aftermath of the battle left the colony in ruins, but it was still standing. And that was enough. The veterans gathered near the center of town, their bodies weary and battered, but their spirits unbroken. John sat on a piece of rubble, cleaning his rifle with slow, deliberate movements. Maria leaned against a crumbling wall, her arms crossed as she stared at the horizon, where the Vraxkai had retreated. Rachel climbed down from her rooftop perch, her sniper rifle slung over her shoulder, while Robert tinkered with a damaged device he'd salvaged from the battlefield. They'll be back, Rachel said flatly, breaking the silence. Her voice carried no fear, only certainty. That wasn't their full force. They're testing us. Daniel nodded, flipping through data on his tablet. She's right, but we've bought ourselves some time. And maybe, just maybe, we've shown them we're not so easy to crush. John stood up, brushing dust off his jacket. His face was lined with fatigue, but his eyes burned with resolve. We've done what we set out to do, he said. But this isn't over. It won't be until we take the fight to them. Maria stepped forward, her expression fierce. Then let's finish this, whatever it takes. The Galactic Council watched the events unfold from their chamber, their holographic feeds showing live images of the veterans. Admiral Chen stood at the forefront, addressing the council members with quiet pride. "These soldiers have proven themselves beyond any doubt," he said. "They've reminded us all that courage and experience are timeless." Senator Grayson, who had doubted the old soldiers at first, now sat quietly, his skepticism replaced by reluctant admiration. "They've earned our trust," he admitted. "But the war is far from won. What happens next?" Chen turned to the others. "We support them. Fully. Every resource, every advantage. We give it to them. Because if anyone can end this, it's them." Back at the colony, reinforcements began securing the area, preparing for the next wave of attacks. Lieutenant Hayes approached the veterans, his uniform smeared with dirt, but his stance firm. "You've done more than anyone could have asked," he said, "but you're not alone anymore. We fight together from here on out." John shook Hayes' hand, a rare smile crossing his face. "About time you caught up with us." As the days passed, word of the veterans' victory spread across the galaxy. Younger soldiers began training under their guidance, learning tactics and strategies honed over decades of war. Stories of their bravery inspired hope among the colonies, reminding everyone that humanity's strength lay not in technology or numbers, but in resilience and unity. The final push came weeks later, when intelligence revealed the location of the Vraxkai Queen, a colossal creature controlling the hive mind. The veterans led the assault, their leadership turning the tide once again. Though the battle was fierce and losses were heavy, they succeeded in destroying the Queen, shattering the aliens' control and forcing their retreat. When it was over, the galaxy breathed a collective sigh of relief. The veterans returned to their quiet lives, content to fade into the background once more. But their legacy endured. Young soldiers spoke of them with reverence, emulating their courage and determination. Humanity had been pushed to the brink, but thanks to these old soldiers, it had survived. John looked out at the stars one last time before stepping inside his cabin. He knew the galaxy would face new challenges someday, but for now, peace had been restored, and that was enough.